Democrats are panicking over the president's shaky performance in last night's historic debate with former President Trump. Some are calling for Biden to be replaced as the nominee.
Voters were also concerned by what they saw from the president as he struggled and stumbled through the evening. George Thomas reports from the debate site in Atlanta.
Within the opening minutes,
eligible for what I've been able to do with the with the COVID, with dealing with everything we have to do with. Look, if we finally beat Medicare,
it became clear to the former president's surrogates that Biden was in trouble.
Biden campaign said this would be the reset moment for Joe Biden's candidacy, and what they saw is the American people saw a weak, horrible president who is the weakest president in our nation's history.
Voter concerns about Biden's age and mental sharpness were on display during the 90-minute debate as the president struggled at times to answer questions.
He repeated things that are not true, but he's also said things that, to be frank, there are times I couldn't understand what he was saying.
The showdown had Biden and Trump, the two oldest candidates to ever seek the White House, trading barbs on a number of topics, from the economy.
The only jobs he created are for illegal immigrants and bounce-back jobs, a bounce back from the COVID. He has not done a good job. He's done a poor job, and inflation's killing our country. It is absolutely killing us.
To abortion.
But we are not for late-term abortion, period. Period.
Under Roe v. Wade, you have late-term abortion. You can do whatever you want, depending on the state. You can do whatever you want. We don't think that's a good thing. We think it's a radical thing. We think the Democrats are the radicals.
To immigration.
When he was president, he was separating babies from their mothers, putting them in cages, making sure the families were separated. That's not the right way to go.
Trump pushed back, accusing Biden of putting in place weak border policies that make America unsafe.
We have the largest number of terrorists coming into our country right now, all terrorists, all over the world, not just in South America, all over the world. They come from the Middle East, everywhere. All over the world, they're pouring in. And this guy just left it open.
The two also tackled wars in Ukraine and Gaza. But by the end of the night, everyone was talking about the president's poor performance.
I have dealt with people that have dementia before, and it's very obvious just from the look on his face, not understanding what's going on, the surprise and shock look sometimes, the eyes, the very stiff face, the very stiff hands. They're all very prominent signs of what's going on.
The White House tried to put a brave face on the evening, telling reporters that Biden had a cold. Surrogates like California Governor Gavin Newsom attempted to sidestep voter concerns that the president is too old.
There's a lot of concern about the president's stamina and mental health. Are you concerned?
I'm worried
81 years. Are you concerned about that going forward?
I agree. I worry about President Trump's stamina.
No, I'm talking about the president.
I was talking about President Trump as well.
One top Biden donor reportedly called the president's performance disqualifying, telling Reuters that he expects Democrats will urge him to step aside ahead of the party's national convention in August. Still, in a post-debate rally, Biden told supporters that he was confident he could win against Trump.
Look, we're going to beat this guy. We need to beat this guy. And I need you in order to beat him. You're the people I'm running for.
Coming into this debate, Biden and Trump found themselves nearly tied in national polls. We'll see in the coming days whether this debate did anything significant to change those dynamics. For now, though, the race is set to be decided here in Georgia and a handful of other key swing states like Michigan, Arizona, and Wisconsin. Meanwhile, voters there and across the country will get another look at the candidates September 10th. George Thomas, CBN News, Atlanta.
All right, thank you, George. With us for more on the impact of this historic debate is our CBN News chief political analyst, David Brody. David, the talk of replacing Biden began with just within a few minutes of the debate ending, and you can see why. There's no bigger softball in politics than a closing statement, and the president stumbled through. How seriously should we take this? And he has to agree to it, correct?
He would have to agree to it. A couple of things. We should take it very seriously. The conversation is no longer about Biden versus Trump and all of the dynamics between that. The storyline moving forward, and the clock is now ticking, is what is Joe Biden's decision? Jill Biden, his wife, will obviously be integral to that. And by the way, let's be honest, shame on Jill Biden for putting her husband out there like that last night. That was very, very tough to see. But Jill Biden will have the most influence. Chris Coons, the senator from from Delaware, and one of his closest friends will have some influence. Also look for people like Mike Donilon, Ron Klain, Ted Kaufman. These are three longtime advisors, all going in to Biden to say, look, let's have a discussion. You know, this reminds me a little bit of Richard Nixon about 50 years ago, August, actually, of 1974, where the Senate minority leader at the time and the House minority leader, along with Republican Senator Barry Goldwater, all walked into the White House and told Richard Nixon, it's time, you're done. And the rest, of course, was resignation history. Though it's not exactly like that, because that was more from a policy and you've lost Congress standpoint. This is more from a personal standpoint, and you wonder when that Richard Nixon conversation happens with Joe Biden. That's where we are today.
Well, we heard George Thomas speaking with an unhappy Gavin Newsom, so it makes you think, if it happens, who would you see as the Democrats' choices for the new nominee?
Well, right. First of all, we're talking about an open convention at that point, and Gavin Newsom could be there for sure. He'd be at the top of the list. Obviously, Kamala Harris would be at the top of the list. I think the question, and now we're getting into speculation, but if Joe Biden does decide to say, I'm going to step aside, the question then will become, in that speech, when he says he'll no longer be the nominee, will he, in essence, endorse Kamala Harris? If he does, you get the sense that Gavin Newsom and others would not run at that point in some sort of open convention situation. But if he doesn't, all bets are off. Kamala Harris, Gavin Newsom, Gretchen Whitmer, the governor of Michigan, J.B. Pritzker in Illinois. There are a lot of Democrats out there itching, ready to get in.
Well, take us through the process. So what would need to happen as we approach the Democratic convention?
Well, the first thing that needs to happen is Joe Biden needs to decide that he's not going to be the nominee. Now, is there a potential that Joe Biden could say, look, I'm going to go all the way through? Sure. And is there a potential that Democrats, delegates, that are pledged to Biden could rebel? Technically, yes, even though they should, from a spirit of the convention rules, stick with them. But there is a bit of an out for them. So they could rebel. I don't think Democrats will tolerate that. So it really is up to Joe Biden. But at that point, what would happen is it'd be an open convention. What does that mean? It means we're back to politicking. We're back to campaigning. Gretchen Whitmer, Gavin Newsom, Kamala Harris, you, me, everybody and their uncle, all at the Democrat convention and the month or whatever leading up to it, because remember, it's in mid-August or so, all basically vying for those, the majority of the delegates at the convention. There are 4,000 delegates, roughly. You need a majority of those 4,000. It'll go to a first ballot. If no one's elected on the first ballot, most likely not, it'll go to a second ballot. And then we can get into all sorts of wonky stuff. But look, the bottom line is if it goes to a second ballot, there's something called superdelegates. We've heard of them before. These are the power brokers in the DNC, the Democratic National Committee. We're talking about congressmen and party leaders. They would then be able to have more of a say in that second ballot. We can explain that some other time. But the bottom line is that's where this could head. It could get real messy real soon.
So what does it mean for Democrats in their races, talking about the Senate and the House?
Well, this is a major problem, and I think this is what to look for in the temporary here. In other words, let's see how this plays out in the next week, maybe 2 weeks or so, and see what kind of advice Joe Biden gets. And then you wait to see what John Tester in Montana has to say. He's the senator. He's considered a moderate who is in trouble in Montana for that Senate seat. You have Sherrod Brown, who is a guy in Ohio that's in some trouble. So let's wait and see what they say in a couple of weeks. And if they come out and say, look, Joe, in essence, you're killing me here. We've got to move on and find someone else. That obviously is a huge game changer. So we wait to see what these moderates, Democrat moderates, do in both the House and the Senate. That will portend greatly for Biden's future.
David, quickly, just a little time left. Van Jones, David Axelrod, some of these folks came out quickly last night with their disappointment and heartache over what they saw. Were you surprised how the floodgates opened from the left in their disappointment and admission of how the president performed?
Not at all, because here's the dirty little secret that everybody needs to understand. If you think about this for a second, let's dial it back for a second. Why was this debate held in June? This was the test run. I think it's pretty clear that there are party insiders and others that want Biden gone. They want someone else. They know that Donald Trump will be the next president of the United States if Joe Biden is the president of the United States, and of course, the candidate to be the next president of the United States. So that's what Democrats deeply want inside. They just can't say it. So last night on CNN and MSNBC and other places, as much as it pained them to do so and say it publicly, you started to hear it, because this was Biden's big test moment. Could he pass the test? Not only did he not pass the test, he failed miserably, as George pointed out in that piece. That blank kind of stare off into space right at the beginning where he fumbled and lost his train of thought. That was the death knell, if you will, politically, and it just got worse from there.
All right, David, thanks for joining us. Always appreciate your insights.